The piano had not been tuned in 11 months. Arthur Sterling knew this, the way he knew most things now, not by looking, but by listening. The A above middle C was pulling flat by approximately 8 cents. The low G had a sympathetic buzz when struck too hard. A loose damper felt, not seen. He had been waiting since 3:30. The appointment was for 4. He heard her on the stairs at 3:57. Footsteps lighter than the previous tuner, more careful about which boards announced themselves, as if she had already learned which ones would. The A is flat, he said, before she reached the doorway. A pause, the sound of a bag being set down. 8 cents, she said, maybe 9. He turned his head, in the direction of her voice. She was standing at the threshold, not in the room yet, not in the hallway either, the specific position of someone who has not yet decided which direction the next few minutes will require her to move. Come in, he said. It won't bite. She came in. Her name was Maya. He learned this not from her, but from the invoice Julian left on the hall table the following week. Maya Reyes. Piano services. The surname different from what she would eventually tell him, which was something he would not understand until much later. For now she was simply the woman who tuned his piano on Thursdays, who worked without asking unnecessary questions, who understood that he would rather sit in the room while she worked than be guided to another part of the house and left to wait. Most people assumed blindness required relocation. She did not assume. She tuned. He stayed. That was the arrangement. Arthur had been, by most accounts, the finest pianist of his generation. He had also been, by his own later account, a man who drank too much on certain kinds of evenings, the kind where the music had gone somewhere he couldn't follow, and the distance felt permanent. The fire happened on one of those evenings. Elena did not survive it. Arthur lost his sight, or believed he did, which for 10 years amounted to the same thing. Julian had been there, from the first morning after, medications managed, documents signed, the house maintained, the outside world kept at the specific distance Arthur required. Julian was, by every visible measure, a devoted brother. Maya worked for 40 minutes. When she had finished the lower register and moved to the upper octaves, the ones nearest the window, that Julian kept half shuttered, a cloud shifted outside. A narrow bar of light crossed the floor and climbed the side of the piano and reached the keyboard in Arthur's hands. He did not react, but Maya stopped. She was standing at an angle she had not been before, slightly to Arthur's left, slightly behind, the position of someone who needs to see a face, without the face knowing it is being seen. She watched. She watched the light. She watched his face. She watched his pupils. They contracted, barely, quickly, the involuntary response of an eye that is receiving information, not the fixed, unresponsive pupils of the genuinely destroyed, but the pupils of a man whose eyes were working in some fundamental way that no one had been told about, or had been told to ignore. She stood very still for a moment. Then she went back to tuning. She did not say anything. Before she left, she paused at the door. Same time next week? She said. Yes, Arthur said. And then, you don't talk much. No. She said. I don't mind it. He said. Most people talk too much in this room, as if the silence needs filling. She didn't answer. Same time next week. He said again. Not a question this time. She left. In the car, she sat for a while, before starting the engine. She opened the bag on the passenger seat, under the tuning hammer and the mutes, and the coil of replacement wire. A small notebook, dark cover. She opened it to the first page. 2 lines, written in her own hand, before the first visit. Elena Vasquez. Stalling 4, 2014. She looked at those lines for a moment. Then she closed the notebook, placed it back under the tools, started the engine, and drove away from the house, where the man who had killed her mother had just told her. He didn't mind the silence. Drop à comment. Have you ever been in a room with someone and understood, in the specific quiet of it, that you were both keeping a secret from each other? 8 months is a long time to sit in a room with someone and say very little. It is also, as it turns out, exactly enough time to learn a person in the ways that matter. The rhythm of their breathing, when the music is going well, versus when it isn't. The specific quality of their stillness, when they are thinking about something they have decided not to say. Maya had spent 8 months learning Arthur Sterling in all of these ways. She had not planned for that. The treatment was her own design. She was not a physician. What she had was 3 years of research, a brother-in-law who was a pharmacist, and the understanding, confirmed by 3 separate specialists, she had consulted anonymously, that the damage Julian had caused was, in principle, reversible. She added the counteragent to his tea. He always had tea at 4:15. Julian had established the habit years ago. Maya had simply added one more thing to it. On the morning of the 34th Thursday, Arthur said, "Why are you helping me?" Not in reference to the piano. They both understood that. Maya set down the tuning hammer. She said, "Because I need you here." Arthur was quiet. "That is not an explanation," he said. "No," she said. "It isn't." He accepted this. The first light came on a Tuesday, not a Thursday, not during one of their sessions, not with Maya present. Arthur was alone. A cloud moved. The afternoon light came through the gap in the shutters. He raised his right hand and held it in the stripe of light. He could not see the hand, but he could see something. A difference in quality between where the light was and where it wasn't. He held his hand there for 4 minutes. Then he lowered it. He did not tell Julian. By the 6th month, he could see the keys, blurred, unreliable in low light, but present. He began to read the documents. Before signing them, he said nothing about this to Julian. He said nothing about it to Maya. He catalogued. On the Thursday of the 9th month, Maya arrived to find a cup of tea already waiting for her, set on the small table, beside the piano bench. She stopped. "I didn't ask for tea," she said. "I know," Arthur said. "You take milk," he said. "No sugar. The cup with the blue rim, because it holds heat better. You always finish it before you leave." She sat down. She picked up the cup. She looked at him, the way she sometimes looked at him, when she thought he wasn't aware of it, with something that was not quite what she had intended to feel. When she first walked up those stairs 11 months ago, she had intended to feel nothing except purpose. Purpose had arrived and remained intact, but it had not arrived alone. On a Wednesday in November, the 41st week, Arthur found the letter. Julian had left it on the hall table, with the other correspondence: shareholder meeting Sterling Group, annual review and proposed restructure. Attendance requested, Julian Sterling, as authorized representative for A. Sterling. Arthur read it 3 times. He stood in the hallway with the letter in his hand and looked at the line, authorized representative. He put the letter back on the table, exactly where it had been, at the same angle. He went to the piano room, sat down, did not play. He thought about the woman who had said, "I need you here." He thought about what here meant, what it had always meant, what it was about to mean. She arrived at 7 in the morning. This had never happened before. She was not carrying her tools. He knew this, because the sound was wrong. The bag she always brought had a specific counterweight that changed the way she moved on stairs. This morning she moved differently. He was at the piano when she came in, not playing, sitting. "You know what day it is?" he said. "Yes." "And you're here early?" "Yes." He turned to face her. The deliberate turn of a man who has learned to orient himself toward the person, rather than the general direction of their voice. She noticed. He knew she noticed. "Tell me what you're not telling me," he said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I have everything I need for today. I wanted you to know that. Before you walk in there." "Everything you need," he repeated. "Yes. For what?" Specifically. She looked at him. He was looking at her, not in the direction of her. "At her. For the reason I came here," she said. Arthur stood up. He crossed the room and stopped at the window. He looked out at the street below. He said, "My wife's name was Elena." Maya did not move. "She died in the fire," he said, "in 2014. In this house, in a room on the 3rd floor, that I no longer go into. I have been told, many times, that the fire was an accident, an electrical fault, bad timing." He paused. "I have never been entirely sure. I believe that." He turned from the window. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he said. "Before we go?" She held his gaze. She said, "No. Not yet." He nodded. They left the house at 9. The Sterling Group boardroom occupied the 34th floor of a building on Park Avenue. The room held 47 people. Julian was at the head of the table, standing, already mid-sentence. He saw Arthur in the doorway. The sentence stopped. "Arthur," he said, "I didn't know you were." "I know," Arthur said. He walked to the table. He pulled out a chair, not the chair Julian had arranged for him, the one at the side, the one that said observer, but a chair at the table. He sat down. He looked at Julian. "Continue," he said. Julian continued. "For 11 minutes. He continued. "The proposed restructure, the new directorships, the reallocation of Arthur's holdings to a management structure, that would," Julian explained, "to relieve Arthur of the burden of decisions that his condition made difficult to navigate." Arthur listened. At the 12-minute mark, he said, I'd like to show the room something. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a folder on the table. 18 months of account statements, he said. Annotated. The annotations are mine. He looked at Julian. I've had some time to read. While everyone thought I couldn't, the room shifted. Julian looked at the folder. He looked at Arthur. He looked, for the first time, at Maya, who was sitting 3 chairs down, on Arthur's left, in the position of someone who intended to watch rather than participate. He said, "You don't understand. You were drinking," Julian said. The words came out, the way words come out when they have been kept somewhere for too long, not with force, but with relief. "You were drinking, and there was a candle, and you didn't know she was still upstairs. You didn't know, Arthur. You never knew, and I was the one who knew, and I was the one who watched you fall apart in that hospital, and I decided," his voice broke, "I decided that if you remembered, it would finish you, and the blindness. The doctor said your eyes were gone, and I thought, if they're gone anyway," he looked at Arthur, "I thought darkness was kinder than what you would see. If you could see clearly." 47 people, in a room on the 34th floor, did not move. Arthur looked at his brother. He did not look away. He said nothing, and the silence that came from him, no shock, not denial, was the silence of a man who had already, somewhere in the long November mornings of the last several months, arrived at this. Then Maya stood up. She walked to the front of the room. She placed a folder on the table. She looked at Arthur. She said, "My name is Maya Vasquez, not Reyes. Vasquez. Elena Vasquez was my mother." She opened the folder. "I have been in your house every Thursday for 11 months. I was not there to tune the piano. I was there because I needed the man who could see the evidence I was going to put in front of him, to have seen it himself, before anyone else could tell him what it meant." She looked at the screen at the far end of the room. "The documents I'm about to show you were collected over 3 years. The first item is the fire marshal's report that was suppressed in 2014. The second is the toxicology from the night of the fire. The third," she paused, "the third you will recognize, Arthur, because it is in your handwriting. A letter you wrote to my mother 2 weeks before she died, asking her not to contact you again." The screen lit up. The room looked at the screen. Arthur looked at the screen. He looked at it the way a man looks at the thing he has been not looking at for 11 years. "And the screen stayed on for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. We know this because the building's security system timestamp logged the projection activation as part of its standard record, one of the many, small, indifferent acts of documentation that surround moments of consequence without understanding them. 4 minutes and 17 seconds of fire marshal reports and toxicology results, and a letter in Arthur Sterling's handwriting that had been sent to a woman 2 weeks before she died, in a fire that the reports had not been allowed to call what it was. 47 people watched the screen. Arthur did not look away. This is the thing that will be remembered by the people in that room, who later tried to describe what happened on the 34th floor. Not Julian's voice breaking, not Maya's name, not the letter on the screen, the fact that Arthur Sterling sat at that table and looked at the evidence of his life without looking away. Julian did not resist. He looked at Arthur as the security personnel positioned themselves on either side of him. The look lasted approximately 5 seconds. What it contained, whether it was an apology, or an accusation, or simply the recognition of one person by another, at the end of something that had begun when they were both young enough to believe that love and damage could be separated. No one in that room could say. Arthur held the look. Then he turned away. Maya walked toward the door at the back. She did not look at Arthur as she passed him. He did not speak to her. She walked through the door. The corridor outside the boardroom was long and carpeted. Maya walked to the end of it. She turned the corner into a shorter hallway, narrower, that led to the emergency stairwell and was not used by people going anywhere in particular. She stopped. She put her back against the wall. She put the bag on the floor, and she cried, not loudly, not the way grief performs itself in rooms with audiences, the way it happens when you have been holding something for 3 years of research and 11 months of Thursdays, and 4 minutes and 17 seconds of a screen showing you the evidence of why your mother was not alive. And you are finally, for the first time since you walked into that house on the first Thursday, entirely alone. She cried because her mother was dead, not because Arthur was being held, not because Julian had confessed, not because the screen had shown what it showed to 47 people who would now know what she had known, because her mother was still dead, because public knowledge of the circumstances did not change the circumstances. She cried for a while, then she stopped. She picked up the bag. She straightened. She walked to the stairwell door and went down 34 flights, without stopping, and out through the lobby and into the November street. Arthur was permitted, at his own request, to return to the house on Sterling Avenue before accompanying the officers to make his formal statement. He went to the piano room. He did not turn on any lights. He stood at the piano. He placed both hands on the keys. He looked at his hands, the hands that had played every major concert hall in the world, the hands that had found the keys in the dark for 10 years by memory alone, the hands that had, on a night in 2014, and held a glass of whiskey, and then held a lighter, in a room where a woman he had told to stop contacting him was still asleep upstairs. He looked at them for a long time. He did not play. He had thought, walking up the stairs, that he might play, that there would be something right about playing. In the last private moment, before everything changed, he found, standing there, that there was nothing to play, or more precisely, that he did not deserve the relief of it. That music had been the one thing in 10 years that had remained available to him, the one room in the long dark house of his life that had stayed lit, and he was not going to use it as a place to hide from what the light had shown him. He lifted his hands from the keys. He turned. He walked back through the house to the front door and opened it and stepped out into the afternoon where the officer was waiting. There is a photograph taken by a building security camera on the corner of Sterling Avenue at 3:14 p.m. It shows a man in a dark suit walking out of a stone-fronted house and down the front steps toward a car on the street. He is walking steadily. He is not being led. He is looking ahead at something outside the camera's frame. The angle suggests it might be the sky, or the street, or simply the specific direction of forward that people move in when the choice about whether to move has already been made. The officer who reviewed it later described it, in passing, to a colleague. He looked like a man who could see. Maya took the train back to Brooklyn. She made dinner. She washed the plate and set it in the rack. She went to her bookshelf. She found, between two larger volumes, the notebook, dark cover. She opened it to the first page. Elena Vasquez, Sterling 4, 2014. She looked at the lines. Then, she turned to the last used page, the final entry, made this morning, before she left for the building. Today. One word. She closed the notebook. She put it back on the shelf. She sat down at the table and looked at the wall for a while. Not at anything on the wall, just at the wall, the specific look of someone who has finished a very long project and has not yet learned what comes after the finishing. Somewhere in a piano room, in a house on Sterling Avenue, a Steinway sat in the flat November light, with its lid closed and its keys untouched. It was still in tune. It would stay in tune for some time yet, several months, probably, before the seasons changed it enough to require attention. There was no one to notice when it drifted. There was no one coming on Thursdays. There are 3 people at the center of this story. One kept a man in darkness to protect him from the truth, and lost everything. When the truth arrived anyway, one lived inside that darkness and discovered, too late, that it had been the last mercy anyone would offer him. One spent 3 years building a fire to burn a house down, and stood in the ash afterward, and found that what she had wanted was not in the house, but had left it 10 years earlier. Drop à comment. Which of the 3 do you understand most? Not forgive, understand. I'll see you next week. What I have for you then is a different kind of darkness, and a different kind of door.